Welcome all friends, all the esteemed colleagues, our senior colleagues who have joined for this important lecture series. Always they are joining for this important lecture series. Dr. Smith, I just want to tell you that the India is celebrating its 75th year of independence. And to commemorate the 75 years of independence is a proud moment for any country. To commemorate this particular event, we have started many activities. We have many events, but one of the important events which we have organized is to conduct 75 lecture series by the eminent persons. Till date, we have organized 43 lectures. Today is the 44th lectures, and these lectures are on very diverse topics. Under these topics, we had many research topics. We had many topics related to the motivation, related to the policies, related to the animal science, many things. But today's lecture is very important, keeping in view the lot of challenges which we have before us for the dairy sector. So, colleagues, we have a very important lecture today on insights from the transformation of dairy in India. And Dr. Smith, I want to just tell you that this platform is being attended by very big personalities, eminent persons. We have Dr. R.B. Singh, we have Dr. Bujar Barua, we have Dr. Rameshwar Singh. They are our honorable vice chancellors. You may be knowing some of them. And we have many other vice chancellors, directors, our deputy director generals, our senior directors from ICAR, and many senior faculty from the universities. We have two other platforms through which our audience, they connect to this important lecture. Friends, Dr. Smith doesn't require much introduction, but it's my pleasant duty to introduce Dr. Smith in front of you. Dr. Jimmy W. Smith, a Guyanese and Canadian citizen, is Director General of the International Livestock Research Institute, ILRI, and Senior Director of one CGIAR's livestock-based system. ILRI is a CGIAR research center focused on research for better lives through livestock, as you all know. Before joining ILRI, Dr. Smith led the livestock portfolio at the World Bank. Working at corporate level, he anchored the bank's investments on sustainable livestock development and mitigating the threat of zoonosis with pandemic potential. Prior to his tenure at the World Bank, Dr. Smith held senior positions at the Canadian International Development Agency, CIDA. Still earlier, Dr. Smith worked at ILRI and its predecessor, the International Livestock Center for Africa, ILCA, where he served as the Institute's regional representative for West Africa and later as director of its system-wide livestock program. Before his decade of work at ILCA and ILRI, Dr. Smith held several senior positions in the Caribbean Agricultural Research and Development Institute and the Livestock Development Company. Dr. Smith is a graduate of the University of Illinois at Urban Champaign, USA, where he completed MSc and PhD degree in animal science. He is widely published with more than 100 publications, including papers in refereed journals, book chapters, policy papers, and edited proceedings. It's a proud moment for all of us to listen to you, Dr. Smith, on the topic Insights from the Transformation of Dairy in India. The floor is yours, Dr. Smith, now. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Agrawal, for that rather charitable introduction. Dr. Agrawal, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a privilege for me to have the opportunity to speak during this 75th year of India's independence. Most people in the world know about the Green Revolution, in which India played a very key role. Fewer know about an even more impressive revolution known as the White Revolution, having an even greater impact on food and nutritional security, livelihoods, and equity in India and elsewhere. I'm pleased today to discuss this industry, and I would like to cover the following topics. I want to unpack the India dairy trends and its context, attempt to point out some of the lessons we could learn from India, and speak a bit about the future in India and beyond. But first, I'd like to pay a little tribute in this film clip to the dairy development in India. So let me start by attempting to unpack the India dairy industry, which, as you would have seen from the film clip, has had not only enormous food and nutritional impacts, but also contributed to growth and equity, and in particular for women. So what are some of the trends we can see? First, it is to be noted that notwithstanding all that is said about rice, milk is the #1 commodity by value terms in India. Over $90 billion worth of dairy production and services. It has overtaken rice some time ago, and the projections are that it will continue to stay in the lead for some time. If we were to look at the value of production in US dollars in India of agriculture, you will see that agriculture contributes over $400 billion, of which livestock contributes about 22% of the total value of agriculture GDP, and dairy 80% of that. So dairying is big business in the hands of smallholders in India. Expenditure in dairy in both urban and rural areas, urban in the yellow and rural in the darker red, continued to grow each year as GDP contributions continue to grow on a per capita basis. This slide is illustrative because it starts way back in the 60s. And as you can see, in those days, the India dairy industry was at a low ebb. And with the introduction of Operation Flood in the late 60s and continuing, perhaps one can say up to the present time, production and productivity grew steadily. And as you can see in this figure, production and productivity grew faster than the number of animals represented in the dots. As you note here, from about 255 liters per animal per day, production is about 1,328 liters per day, according to the records we have looked at. This is indeed impressive growth, but I want you to remember this figure about 1,328 liters because I would refer to this later. But by any stretch of imagination, you can see that the will of the government and the efforts of Operation Flood and many, many partners, this has been a remarkable success story in India, from which much of the world can learn. I want to illustrate here that not only is this big business in India, but in comparative terms across the world, India leads in milk production. In the green bar, you would see the aggregate of the whole European Union, all the countries combined. In the blue bar, first at the top is the United States for cow's milk. And India's cow's milk alone roughly equates that of the United States, a powerhouse in dairy production. And if we were to add buffalo, as is seen in the light gray here, it is illustrated that India dairy industry has no match. But it's not only the growth that we can talk about and what it may have contributed to GDP. We must look at the nutritional impacts as represented here by the availability of milk to the Indian population. Grams per day have been growing steadily, and therefore, with this growth in the dairy sector, more and more milk has become available to Indian inhabitants. Milk, as we know, as they say, one can be fed but not be nourished. Milk is a very nourishing food, and therefore this figure is of great significance in terms of its nutritional impacts. In the dotted lines here, you will see that in those early years, India had to import a considerable amount of dairy products in order to meet its needs. But in this solid line, you can see now that India is a major exporter of dairy products. So this has been a tremendous success story in terms of production, productivity, contribution to nutrition, economic growth, but most important, equity. And I would return to this point about equity because the Indian dairy industry is largely in the hands of smallholders. But this didn't happen by accident. It was deliberate policy, investments, and will of the government and its institutions and other partners. Amongst the things we should note is that the Operation Flood effort, which catalyzed this growth and development, started by creating a market pull. We should note that without markets, technology cannot be assimilated or cannot be sustained. It is useless to provide to a farmer a Rolls Royce of a cow that produces large amounts of milk every day if that farmer cannot sell it. Therefore, the efforts at linking farmers to market, having done that, a tremendous pull was created for better technology, feed, genetics, health, and so on. But efforts were also made to skill up farmers and to professionalize farming and farm management. Research played a critical role, and I'm always thrilled to visit NDRI to see the impressive research that has gone on there over the years and continue to do so. That, along with the large university and other institutions of the Indian Institute of Agricultural Research, continue to support this effort. Importantly, and an important message, I must say, is that that research begins with the end in mind. It's not research for research's sake. It is research with an end in mind, bearing in mind who the producers are, their need for scale neutral rather than scale responsive technologies, their circumstances in terms of endowments of resources, and so on. So that research is put in the context of the Indian farmers. And of course, policies are instituted to support the industry. In this graphic, you would see a large number of actions or deciding not to act on what has happened over time. I do not have time to discuss all of these, but it illustrates that this was a deliberate effort of creating the market, helping farmers to respond to that market, underpinning the sector with supporting policies, and so on. It did not happen by serendipity. It did not happen by accident. I want to illustrate here in a briefer depiction what has happened. Policies and institutions, I refer to the market and the technical support. All these must come together, but they can only come together orchestrated by political will. And the political will that uses policies, markets, technical interventions to support who the producers were. And in the case of India, there are predominantly very small producers, and in which many women are involved. This is a lesson many developing countries can learn, and I'll come back to this later. But to trigger the growth and development such as we've seen in India, it is very important that we consider these steps and these ingredients. Notwithstanding the great progress that has been made, there are still some gaps. On the bottom part of the slide, where there's not a very big gap between what is possible by interventions from market access and inputs delivery, where I said India has done a remarkable job. But in the top half, you can see that there is still some ways to go and some benefits to be derived from technical inputs, so that working in the area of health, genetics, and feed, and particularly genetics and feed, but also health, much can be gained. And I will come back to these points later. So a great job by India, but still opportunities to grow and develop. And it must, because as you will see later, that the demand has not plateaued and will continue to grow. So it's no time to sit back and wait. We must continue this effort. Let me touch a bit on the research efforts and say a little about where ILRI has partnered with Indian institutions. As I referred to earlier, there are many opportunities that have been pursued in India. Genetics, health, nutrition, and in particular feeding. And feeding is still an important question in India that I'll come back to in the context of the environmental changes that are taking place. But there are also challenges with respect to livestock in the environment. The environment is much known and talked about at the present time. And we know that livestock play a very important role in greenhouse gas emissions and other impacts on the environment. We must take care of these in the future. We must deal with the health issues, and we hope in a One Health context, and we have been working with Indian institutions in zoonotic disease, antimicrobial resistance, and food safety. And of course, still work, as I said, to be done on markets and policy. National governments are paying keen attention to this in India, and many are developing livestock master plans. So to support the national efforts, various national governments are working on this aspect. I want to illustrate the issue now of emissions in the context of climate change and all that we're hearing about greenhouse gas. On this figure, we illustrate that when production is low, the emissions in terms of greenhouse gas per unit of product is very high. So it's very important that we move the productivity and the output per animal down along this curve to increasing average production per day. And I ask you to remember the 1,300 liters per day. You can see where that sits in this graph. So although India has made great strides in production, the productivity is still relatively low, and therefore the emission intensity from dairying is still pretty high. But with inventions continuing, and indeed the work I've seen across India to improve production and productivity, it is only a matter of time and with sustained effort that we will move the average production per cow to higher and higher levels, and therefore reduce the emissions intensity. These bars for dairy, cattle, and buffaloes show the kinds of feeds that are used to feed both dairy cattle and buffaloes. It is worth noting that there is a great symbiosis in India between livestock production and crop production. Livestock contribute fertilizer, helps with power and transport, and in turn, shown in the gold bar, in both the case of buffalo and cattle, that crop residues are the dominant feed in India. So we need to do more about how we utilize the crop residues in India to drive the dairy industry. Because of the scarcity of land, as you can see in this graph, the contribution of forages, fresh grass or pastures is very low. So the possibilities for improved feed largely lie in better use of crop residues and in manufacturing byproducts from rice, coconut, and so on. I'll come back to this issue of crop residues in a bit. So the opportunities for more and better feed, as I said, rely on crop residues because they are the dominant source of feeding in India. Studies have shown that 1% increase in the digestibility of sorghum stover fed to dairy cow leads to about 6 to 8% increase in milk. This is for sorghum. We know the trend holds true for millet, and we're sure that if we were able to increase the productivity, the digestibility of rice straw, we can also make it a more important feed resource in India. To improve feed quality, there are very many ways we can do it. We can include crop breeding parameters, feed parameters in crop breeding programs, so that when the rice breeder thinks about a new variety, he or she thinks not only about the grain, but the value of the stover. Significant increase in crop residue improvements in digestibility will lead to significant yields in milk. And this is a resource, in the case of rice straw, readily available in India and considered a pollutant in certain times of the year. There's also need for processing, and processing can help in making crop residues more accessible. Manufacturing of feed blocks, leveraging the spin-off technologies from second-generation biofuels technologies, and so on. So this combined effort of both breeding, but also processing, can unlock more feed resources for the Indian dairy industry. This is not an area completely ignored, because Indian institutions and ICAR, for example, have been releasing new cultivars, pearl millet, sorghum, groundnut, and maize that are of better feed value and are being used. These dual-purpose sorghum varieties, which have been released in India, are fairly widely used, and maize hybrids are also popular. We can do the same for rice, I believe. This is to illustrate that processing can make the accessibility of these coarse straw more available. It's a technical slide, but it's put merely to illustrate that if you were able to process some of these stover, you can increase the live weight gain to be derived from feeding them considerably. And depending on the technology you use, the response in terms of live weight gain varies. In this case, from just 1.5 kilograms of gain to over 6. So there's hope here. I want to come back to the issue of rice straw, which, as we know, is abundant and is mostly burnt. 160 million tons of rice straw, at least 60% burned, producing a huge amount of greenhouse gas, for which the livestock sector is often charged with the negative aspects of sustainability in these systems. Whilst the livestock sector is often talked about, not much is said about what happens in the crop sector. But as we know, when rice straws are being burnt in India, there's a huge pollution effect. We believe that breeding can help with making this rice straw more available to the dairy industry. Let me say a word about health, because it's not just feed, we must also work on health. Some of the work that is going on zoonotic diseases is of critical importance. We have just learned about, we have just experienced what COVID-19 has been, widely believed to be of zoonotic origins. So we must continue this work so as to not only attempt to prevent pandemics, but to deal with the endemic zoonosis as well. We know that as systems intensify, we use more drugs in them, such as to deal with bacteria, to deal with various diseases such as lumpy skin and so on. So we use a fair amount of drugs, and we don't know exactly how much at this time is used in India, but we must work on this area of antimicrobial resistance. So solutions here relate to One Health, how we link crop, livestock, and the environment together so that the future of the dairy industry is more sustainable, not only in economic and social terms, but environmental and health terms as well. We have been working with ICAR and others doing their work on food safety, because as we know, most of the food in the developing world is derived from informal markets. Most of the milk is consumed, derived and consumed in informal markets, are accessed by consumers from informal markets. So we must work on these markets to make them safe and not shut them down, as many advocates would suggest we do. So, notwithstanding the success we've had, we must plan for the future. And as we can see here, Bihar and Odisha, for example, are working on developing livestock master plans, which seek to accelerate the development of the dairy industry. In doing so, technical investments are considered, but also how to continue to have growth with equity so that women and marginalized communities are benefiting. Increased processing and marketing, and being sure that the states respond in the context of demand pull, not technical supply push. So lots of going on at the state level that we expect would help to accelerate the dairy industry. So what does the future look like? As I said, notwithstanding the great gains we've made, population will continue to rise, as you can see, and it would probably not stabilize until about 1.6 billion or just above that. The dotted line here on the vertically shows where we are now. So there is going to be considerable population growth that will demand more milk. We must continue to have the sector grow and supply this milk. And this is what is projected to look like from 2010 to 2030. And by the time population stabilizes at about 2050. So much gain, but much is left to be done. It is still true that the dairy industry in India is dependent and relies on smallholders. And in this graphic, large farms is represented in the red part, and the very light blue and green are small farms, ranging from 1 to 2 cows to 11 to 30 cows. And you can see there's no red or very little red in this pie chart for Africa and for India. So these sectors rely heavily on smallholders, and that will continue to be the case. So the policies which have supported development of these smallholders needs to continue. But the context of changing and the drivers are too, so the transition must continue. I already referred to climate change and how we must adapt to climate change, but we must also mitigate climate change. So the research which we must continue to do must target these. We must contribute incentives, create incentives for greater environmental sustainability. We have to take more consideration of the youth and employment for them. The digital era is here with us, and the dairy sector must also benefit from that. And consumers and consumer diets are changing. The ratio between urban and rural populations are also changing, and we must respond to all of these. So even as time changes and there is some aggregation, there will be a mixture of small and large farms, but predominantly small. And we must continue to deal with the issue of health. So looking at what happens in the future and trying to relate what's happening in India to Africa, here Africa in the dark bar and India in the what is that color? Beige, maybe. You can see that as India is growing, so is Africa. And there is great opportunity here for South-South transfer of technology and know-how, so that the lessons from India can be adopted here in Africa. Let me conclude by summarizing here what we think is needed in the future based on what we have learned from the past. There must be political will. If countries from the South want to learn from what has happened in India, we must have political will to drive the industry. We must create suitable policies and institutions. And these must take into consideration the new environmental context. Connecting farmers to markets, it's a key, it's a prerequisite. Technology push does not work. Building the dairy industry from its base, not the hypothetical base that we hope it will be in the future. Building it from where it is now. Enabling and improving safe, informal markets. Most of the food in developing countries are derived in formal markets, and so is milk. Technology elements that work for smallholders, women and youth. And I referred to the particular leverage that improved feeds, genetic, and animal health provides. And of course, in this day of concern about changing climate, we must mitigate and/or adapt to these changes. The dairy industry, the animal sector, is regarded as a major contributor to greenhouse gases, and we must take that into consideration in the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, and congratulations on the 75th anniversary year. Thank you, India, for your contributions to global food and nutritional security, and for contributing to growth and equity, and to providing vital lessons that the rest of the world can learn from as to how to stimulate a vital industry in equitable ways. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Professor Smith, for giving so many points for our consideration. And yes, we fully agree that we have to connect farmers to the market. And as you have rightly pointed out, one can be fed but not nourished. Yes, that's true. Now I'll request some of the persons who are directly involved with this. I'll request Dr. Tripathi, our Deputy Director General, Animal Science, if you can just give some of your viewpoints. Dr. Tripathi, please, can you unmute? Arpit, please unmute.
Hello.
Yes, Tripathi.
Hello, actually I'm traveling, that's why I'm traveling, but even then, really I would like to make few comments. Yeah. And just to say that Dr. Smith has really given a very, very good overview of in Indian context, how animal husbandry is going along, and discussing all the research aspects, especially on the nutrition side, because that is a cost of production in India is almost 60 to 70% goes to animal nutrition. So we need to go for the various alternatives, and that is what Dr. Smith has given a very detailed account of that what we can really do for that. And also Dr. Smith had this was very nicely about the One Health issues in India, and how we can really with the ILRI and ICAR collaboration we can go along for the mitigating the One Health issues and working together. So, in overall, Dr. Smith has really given a very, very good presentation of Indian insights from the dairy sector. And he also highlighted that we have been doing very good in production overall, but there has been a very, very less productivity from the animals. And that is also one of the issues for the greenhouse gas emission. So all those things he has enumerated, and what can really do in the next, I mean, in case of in the futurology that was looking for, and we have got a lot of opportunity to work in this direction and get our livestock productivity better. And also it can be a very good source of income from the Indian people, where small holders constituting almost 70 to 80% of the dairy sector. So all these things that's really gone very well. So I must congratulate Dr. Smith for the wonderful lecture and giving a lot of insights from our Indian dairy sector. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Tripathi ji, because you are the key person from ICAR to collaborate with the ILRI. So thank you very much for your viewpoints. Now, may I request Dr. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. May I request Dr. Bujar Barua, who has been in the past the Deputy Director General of Animal Science. He has been the Vice Chancellor, and he has held many key positions and has been in a close collaboration with the ILRI. Dr. Bujar Barua, thank you very much for joining. And can I have your viewpoints that what is the Indian stand and how we are going to have our future strategies as pointed out by Dr. Smith. Dr. Bujar Barua, please.
Thank you, Dr. Agua. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. First of all, my compliments to Dr. Smith for so very nicely putting the Indian dairy sector together, covering its important aspects like the health aspect, the feeding aspect, the breeding aspect, and all that. I am aware ILRI's involvement in India in pushing the dairy sector forward, involving the smallholders. There are 2-3 points. Actually, at this point of time, what we need is a complete technology capsule Now, we say technology intervention. Now, the thing is, can we approach the smallholder or even the big holders with a complete technology capsule? My second observation here is, I have seen that they already have a program in Bihar, wherein one of the options given is the crossbreeding. Now, we have had our own experiences with crossbreeding. And right at this moment, India is actually trying to focus on its indigenous breed, improve upon their productivity and all that. So that aspect also, I think ILRI will have to look into. And there are regional imbalances. You have spoken about the per capita availability of milk, which is very good in India, but we do have regional imbalances in per capita availability, particularly in northeastern region and all that. For example, only around 74 grams per capita. So maybe the thing is, you have ILRI and your Indian counterpart. They will have a joint mission to see how best this could be improved through breeding, through all other means. As a whole, I would say we are all proud of Indian dairy sector. We are all very proud. But a time has come, the kind of production we have achieved. How much is this production from the technology side? And how much it is from the management side by the smallholder? If we can differentiate and then see, yes, we are happy with the technology injection. If we are not, then what are the ways we should adopt to see that more technology is injected into the sector to even take it to more high. But I'm actually so very much happy to see the coverage of Dr. Smith. Everything he has covered, so very beautiful slides, the information that you have given, really very exemplary. You have done a lot of hard work to
Thank you, Dr. Bajabarua, sir, for your viewpoints. Dr. Smith, you have any point to make on the observation of Dr. Bajabarua?
Yeah, thank you. I agree entirely, and I'm aware of the policy of the Indian government to promote indigenous breeds. Highly commendable. We talk about crossbreds only where they exist and capitalizing on them because they are there. But certainly, the opportunity to use indigenous breeds and to select and breed amongst them, both cattle and of course the buffalo is entirely indigenous. That's where I believe we should focus. So I agree very much with those points. The regional imbalances, as happens in almost every sector everywhere in the world, there's sufficient food in the world to feed everybody, but it's not where people are. So this is a big challenge. And of course, how to develop the dairy sector where there is a comparative advantage to do so in those regions, the lagging regions, the marginalized regions, the regions where the environmental conditions are not so good. We have to balance seeking to development the dairy industry in those parts of it, of course, the ability to do so, would it be profitable? But of course, processing and transport, as these links develop, these imbalances can be met through within country trade and so on. And I agree that we have to look very carefully at what sort of technology and management mixes that we can use to trigger further growth in the dairy sector in India. As I pointed out, the area of genetics and feed, as well as health, still have huge potential to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and thank you, Dr. Bajabarua. Before I take one question by one of the audience, Dr. Ravinder, may I request Dr. Chauhan, who is the director of the National Dairy Research Institute. Amrit, can you just unmute him? Dr. Chauhan, as you know, Dr. Smith, we have one of the biggest institute, National Dairy Research Institute, and he is heading this institute as a director. So, Dr. Chauhan, do you have some points to make regarding the lecture the points which were raised by Dr. Smith in the transformation of the dairy in India?
Yeah, thank you very much. And Professor Smith, you might be knowing me because we had a very good interaction in 2015 year, and where you have seen the work which is being carried out by NDRI, particularly in the area of embryo transfer technology, IVF and cloning. Like you said that genetics is very important. Of course, genetics is very important, but the limitations what we are facing here in India, that the artificial insemination program, which is not covering much animals because of the limitations of the semen. And that too, the high pedigree semen, quality semen. And I think the ILRI and we can work together in this direction in order to increase the quality or high pedigree bull. And that one area where we can look forward to have an interaction with you and then also to have an input from you so that we can increase the number of bulls which can be ultimately utilized for the AI, for the semen production and then subsequently EI. So, and your talk was very excellent. As usual, we saw that last time also, it was an excellent talk. But this is the one area where we can look forward. And of course, there's some sort of advanced assisted reproductive technologies, which is also going to help, like ovum pickup and IVF, which has been initiated by Government of India in 30 locations now. So these things maybe like we can work together and to so that we can have some sort of the outcome which is going to enhance the milk production further.
Thank you, Dr. Chauhan. Now, Dr. Smith, we'll have just two quick questions, and then I think we can conclude. Dr. Rameshwar Singh has just written, Dr. Rameshwar Singh, he was earlier working in NDRI, and presently he's the Vice Chancellor of one of the veterinary university. Yeah. Dr. Rameshwar Singh, can you just put your question?
Sir, thank you. Dr. Smith, thank you very much. I have a question that smallholder farms put a limitation on the infusion of technology. And so in future, to address milk quality and productivity, do you advocate that we should go for promotion of large farms in India?
No. Land size is small. And India has demonstrated that you can grow an industry with small farmers. Let me extend that discussion a little and be very brief about it. If you look at agriculture technology, if you look at agriculture growth around the world, there are two types of growth. Vernon Rutan and Jaime described in their elaborate works. It says that if you're land abundant, you can go for mechanical technology and gain your productivity through that means. But if you land scarce, abundant land is such in the United States. So mechanical technology work very well there. But if you're Japan, you can't have all these big combines and so on. So there is biological technology. And so depending on your resource endowment, you have to choose a path. And India's path is on smallholder farms and increasing the biological productivity, not the mechanical. If you go to large farms, you go into mechanical technology, combining it with biological technology, mind you, but that's not what you have. So there is huge opportunity to increase the productivity of the individual animals, biological technology, but we must improve the feeding, the genetics, and the health. So my advice would be stick to the road you're on and just do more of responding to those three areas.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and thank you, Dr. Rameshwar Singh, sir. Dr. Smith, there is a query by one of the audience, Dr. Naresh Kumar, that what would be the integrated model in dairying for sustainable development of farmers in India?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
What could be the integrated model in dairying for sustainable development of farmers in India?
Well, I don't think there is going to be a single model. There are going to be many different models depending on the endowment and where you are, rainfall, suitable lands, and so on and so on. But an integrated model is largely what you have now, where livestock contribute to farming and crop farming, and crop farming contribute to livestock. So I think that's a good model, and it's of various dimensions. In some places is rice, other places is sorghum, and so on, depending on the ecology. These are all very good models on which we can build. I talked a lot about the rice straw because I think it's a wasted resource at the moment. And if livestock scientists can encourage the rice breeders to include digestibility and utilization characteristics for livestock on rice production, then you have a win-win. So that would be an integrated farming system that I would encourage India to pursue. It not only deals with the need for more feed and therefore dealing with helping with production and productivity, but it also deals with the environmental aspects of the rice industry.
Thank you, Smith, Dr. Smith. Dr. Mohapatra also has joined, our Director General. But before I invite Dr. Mohapatra, may I request Dr. R.B. Singh, who was earlier the Director of Indian Agricultural Research Institute and a very, in a multidimensional, he has really contributed a lot. So Professor R.B. Singh, sir, please. Please unmute, sir. Yes.
Please,
sir, please unmute, sir, please.
Sir, please unmute.
Yes, now fine.
My friends, can you help me in getting
Yes, now we can listen to you, sir, please.
You can listen to me. Well, first of all, let me congratulate the outstanding speaker. It's very comprehensive presentation. I think this is, in all compartments, it's very full. Absolutely great, and congratulations. We look forward to get more advice for the Government of India and our system through ILRI, and this is a great job. Let me highlight a few things. As a matter of fact, there is always a silver lining to many of the clouds, and the silver lining of the COVID pandemic was that we have been able to think of one health, one world. It was that compulsion which came through this process, and therefore this one health, one world through COVID, that is the silver lining of this, and we are finding that we have to aim for one people, one planet, one prosperity. 3 Ps, and this has been forced upon, and nothing can serve this purpose better than livestock. Livestock will serve the purpose, livestock in the middle of it. So even if you look at the one health, one world concept, it is the soil, it is the plant, it is the animal, then the human. Animal, human, and many of the diseases to be probably epigenetic, the genetic diseases and so on. And look at those connectivities, I think in this today's context of one health, this livestock and human being close in many senses and experimentations and so on, this is a very important aspect to be kept in mind, that this is the gift of COVID, and the gift of COVID brings us together with a greater force and emotion. Number 2, the ownership of livestock is egalitarian. In other words, most of the livestock are owned by smallholders. Small is poor. In India, the number of smallholders being poor is proportionately 4 times higher than those who are not farmers. And if the number of poor has decreased in India to any extent through the farming system, livestock has played the highest role, the biggest role in reducing the poverty and at the same time improving the nutrition. So being the egalitarian ownership, it has brought into greater nutrition to poor, and so that it is pro-poor. So the question, Ramesh sir, which you asked, should we ask mass production by bigger people? No. As a matter of fact, India has those people. Those have to be retained here, and they are best for this purpose. Mind you, millions of women in the morning under the Amul with Korean's program deposit millions of kilos of milk every morning. Imagine the empowerment of women, and that is inclusiveness and inclusive development, bringing the youth and women, empowering the woman to become. So these are the unique features which has to be kept in mind of India's way of development. And if Orissa and Bihar is today waiting for this, and they have done this experiment and they are finding it very useful, this kind of approach in many of the sub-regions and other regions, including tribals, should be promoted in a very strong manner. And of course, while we go ahead with this, the livestock is often blamed for the high GHG emission, carbon emission, and so on and so forth. There are now many genetical feed system management, feed management, rumen flora management. You can really make a lot of change in the total process. You can reduce the carbon dioxide emission in a very significant manner. So this is another very important thing, which I will say that don't let anything else come in the way of development of this. Another thing which I think when we improve the indigenous breeds, this is absolutely essential because there may be say pro-climate resilience. The high climate resilience of indigenous breeds is already a built-in system. And with the climate becoming a major force of disruption, now with the indigenous breeds coming into picture, they are producing more, then automatically we are managing climate through the indigenous breed because they are to biotic and abiotic stresses, they are much more tolerant and resistant and so on. And further efforts should be made in that direction.
Thank you, sir.
What I will see, a new technology which has been developed, I hope you people know it better, as we used to have surrogate mother, in NDRI to produce many calves from one cow. Now one elite cow from the elite bull. Now, can we make surrogate father? There has been a discovery of surrogate father, and therefore you can not only use the surrogate mother, you can use the surrogate father also. And I don't have time to explain to you, but this is a very major development which has taken place in livestock sector. Surrogate father.
Thank you, sir.
And if you all do this thing, the livestock will certainly lead as it is leading today the economy of the country. It will continue to be leading the economy of the country, increasing the growth rate of agriculture up to at least 3.5 to 5% annual growth rate of agriculture. And finally, to Rameshwar, let me tell you, production by masses, mass production, not mass production by machine. I think India is suitable for mass production by masses, and this is what we have the smallholders already there. You must humanize the process of development, and inclusiveness will come through that process. The small will grow. Empower the small to be able to take advantage of this. Thank you very much. Sorry
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for your excellent points. Now, Dr. Smith, do you want to add something for the remarks of Professor R.B. Singh?
Nothing except to say that I agree with all the points he made. I was absolutely thrilled that he has made them. The learning from COVID for One Health. Don't waste the crisis. The egalitarianness, if there's such a word, of the dairy sector. The indigenous breeds and what they bring and their adaptation and so on. And mass production by masses, not by machines. I endorse and imbibe all these values. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for making
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Now, I request Dr. T. Mohapatra, Secretary of our department and Director General of Indian Council for Agricultural Research, for his valuable remarks so that we can conclude this talk.
So thank you, Dr. Agrawal. So I just came in to thank Dr. Jimmy Smith. And I missed your lecture completely because I was in another meeting. So I is just to say hello to you, Dr. Jimmy Smith, and then profusely thank you for agreeing to deliver the 44th lecture in the series that we are having in the context of 75th year of India's independence. So in that context, we are inviting and learning from experts like you. And as I heard the discussions and the comments of Professor R.B. Singh, and previous to that, some of the comments, certainly there are a lot more to take home from your lecture, Dr. Smith. And we would certainly prepare action plan. For every lecture, we are deliberating and deriving some action plans for us to work on. And in that context, it's very, very valuable. And we would certainly get back to you, Dr. Smith, through our ILRI office, Dr. Raman, that if we need any further, kind of engagement and support, and what way to move forward. That's what I can say at this point in time. And so once again, profuse thanks to Dr. Smith. And let us give Dr. Smith a big hand.
Thank you, sir, for thanking Dr. Smith on behalf of the Indian Council for Agricultural Research. I also join Dr. Mohapatra in thanking Dr. Smith to you for having agreed to deliver this wonderful talk. And the kind of audience you could see, we had with us Dr. Bujal Barua, Dr. Chauhan, Dr. Rameshwar Singh, Dr. Tripathi, many more persons, and they interacted with you, Professor R.B. Singh, and many more. So it's really a great platform where we have the great learning from the speakers like you. And this platform has given us a lot of points, a lot of recommendations. You see, from these 44 lectures, we have a long way to go. And these lectures will be available on ICAR website also for the future reference, for the benefit of those who could not attend these lectures. So thank you very much once again to you and your whole team, which was in constant touch with us, especially Dr. Rahman. So thank you very much, sir, for this once again. And I wish that we will have the long-term collaboration. We'll have all kind of technical collaborations with ILRI as we have in the past. Thank you once again, and thanks to all the audience for attending this lecture. Thank
Dr. Agarwal, may I say a few words?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to ILRI and the excellent speaker, excellent presentation by our DG ILRI. Just to mention few words, Dr. Bujal Barua has mentioned that the inequity in taking milk in the northeastern region. So for your information, ILRI has already planned a program for the northeastern conclave to transforming the livestock sector for the livelihood. But due to this was planned in February, this month only, but because of the COVID and other Omicron, we could not do that. Hopefully in coming months, that will be definitely taken. Another thing, sir, our Honorable R.B. Singh sir has mentioned about the methane emissions. Sir, we have already taken, DG sir also approved, DG ICAR already approved a program on the methane emission and its mitigation. And we have developed some product. We are also developing some anti-methanogenic product that can be helpful in reducing that. And we also already proved that some of the products, they are reducing about 20% methane emissions in that way. So another thing that Honorable Minister for Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairying, he also requested us to take a program on the Gir cattle improvement, particularly in Gujarat, and we are working on that, and that will be supported by them. And on the request of the Secretary, Animal Husbandry, Ministry of Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairying, we are also working on the master plan. Particularly, he wants a master plan of the dairy sector. That is also under process, sir, that all those will be very helpful. In other way, that we are also working on the feed and fodder, that also very helpful. And with the, as our Honorable DG sir has already mentioned, the work plan. ILRI is also planning to making the work plan for 2023. And before that, we'll discuss with the ICAR, ILRI and the ministry, so that we can develop the work plan for from 23 onwards. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman, for updating us about the various points. So thank you, Dr. Smith, once again, and thanks to your whole team. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Agrawal, and all our distinguished colleagues. Thank you very much for the honor. It was a privilege of mine to do so. I look forward to visiting India and all my good friends and colleagues in the near future. Thank you.
We are eagerly waiting for your visit, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Raksa.